The news that broke about 20 minutes ago involving the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta President Raphael Bostic, we're learning that some of his personal financial managers made trades that ran afoul of central bank rules. Now, these are revelations that we've learned in updated disclosures submitted by Raphael Bostic, who apparently alerted the Fed about some of these trades that he says weren't made directly by him, but by one of his third-party money managers on his behalf. We've also learned that the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, has asked the Office of the Inspector General to look a little bit more into this. Let's get some insights here from Jim Bianco of Bianco Research, because there is a broader issue here that we, I guess, talked about maybe a year or so ago when it came to Kaplan, when it came to Rosengren, and then to a certain extent with Clarida and even Jay Powell himself. This idea of members of the FOMC trading, something that technically they are allowed to do, though there are some restrictions there. And we should point out, just for clarity here, that we don't know if anything done was illegal. We know that the Kaplan trades, we know that the Rosengren trades, to a certain extent, met the rules that the Fed had set out. But there is a question here, Jim, about public perception and about the idea that there is discretion on the part of these Fed members when it comes to the disclosure and whether we're getting proper disclosures in a timely manner.
That's exactly right. I think that what we saw last year really did spark or strike to the heart of, their credibility and their integrity. And I know that that is something that they take very seriously, and they should take very seriously. And now, after that, they put together a very set of rules to try and tighten that down. Raphael Bostic was a member of the Fed last year. He knows all of those rules. I understand he's using an outside manager, and I understand that it's hard sometimes to know what the outside manager is doing on your behalf. But he's also the chair or the president of the Atlanta Fed, and he's under strict rules. And it's his job to know those rules and not run afoul of them. So that he didn't know, sure, I'll take him at his word that he didn't know and that he didn't mean to violate the rules. But you violated the rules. And I work in the financial business. A lot of other people do. We have certain rules on our personal trading accounts. And if we go to FINRA or the SEC and say, but I didn't really know, that doesn't cut it. And it's not going to cut it here either.
How much more pressure then does this put on them? To Romaine's point, the public perception, the idea of really trying to have credibility in this Fed, what further pressure does this put on them to review their own rules? And of course, we're also thinking about our elected officials who have been pushing for more rules too.
Oh, I think it puts a lot of pressure on them. I mean, elected officials is a completely different issue, and I think it's far, far worse what they do in terms of trading in Congress than what we're talking about here. But the Fed has, and especially in this environment with the Fed aggressively raising rates and how the market has been just hanging on every word that the Fed says, when you sit in that room and you have not only access to that information, but you shape that policy, and then in any way you are benefiting from it personally, that is something that you have to take with the utmost seriousness. I think Raphael Bostic is. I think he did the right thing by amending his statement and making it public and not trying to hide it or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is they're held to a higher standard. Congress should be held to a higher standard too, although Congress, we'd like to hold them to a higher standard, but they fail us on so many levels, and that being one of them.
Jim, of course, you write at the intersection of really where government plays a role within the economy and vice versa. And at the moment, the economy is going to be playing a big role within government. We're about to face midterm elections. Could this become some sort of political football once again, as we've seen it before? Or do we think this is more a question of efficacy coming from the Federal Reserve as it has to impose painful, and they are painful, interest rate hikes on an everyday consumer?
Well, right now I think it's efficacy, but I think, if it becomes public what it was that its outside managers did, and if they were profiting from the idea that interest rates were going to go up and the stock market was going to go down, at a time when they're giving speeches saying that it's important for people to understand that some pain is going to have to be endured to bring down inflation, but not the members that are setting the policy because they're profiting from it and they're sitting in the room setting policy, that could be a real problem. Might be less so if you wind up losing money on it, but we don't know.
I have a kind of a broader esoteric question here, Jim, and it's kind of about Fed communication overall and kind of the big shift that we saw under Bernanke as an attempt to be a little bit more transparent about how the sausage is made. And there are a lot of people who say, at least in the market, who actually really like that. They kind of want to see kind of the step-by-step process. There are also a lot of people now advocating that maybe we've kind of swung the pendulum a little bit too far. We see too much of these people. Every single day they're out there sort of jawboning whatever they want to jawbone, and it maybe muddies the water. And I'm curious as to where you stand on that, particularly when it comes to the effectiveness of that communication collectively.
Well, I think always more communication is better than less, so I wouldn't be in favor of doing away with communication. I'd like them to do away with their blackout period, which starts 2 weeks before the meeting, but they're not going to do that. And I also think that part of the problem, too, is that there isn't an effective strategy within the Fed. Now, what do I mean by that? They're raising rates. They're raising rates 75 basis points every meeting. Why? Why are they raising rates? What exactly is the long-term inflation dilemma that they're trying to address? They haven't given a speech on that. All of the speeches they give, like Jay Powell's 8-minute speech in Jackson Hole, is we're not going to pivot. The next meeting, we're going to raise rates by this much. Okay, that's fine, the next meeting. But what about the bigger picture? Why did we take rates from 0 to, into the 3% range and potentially going to mid-4s? What is it that you're trying to do? I don't think they give that speech because I don't think that they can agree internally as to what they're doing. I think there's some division in the Fed. And now that you've got division in the Fed, you're not getting this, trading on the side, it's a big problem for them in terms of communication.
Jim Bianco, thanks for your communication. President of Bianco Research, we appreciate it. We're actually